What it's like to be a stage actor? What is the best approach to appreciate Shakespeare? What are the common misunderstandings people have about actors and actresses? Joseph Graves, a veteran actor and director from the US, will tell you about the fun and reality of this glamorous trade. A teacher at Peking University, an actor on stage, Graves has been living in China since 2002. He dedicates his life to introducing Shakespearean plays to China. As the artistic director of PKU's Institute of World Theatre and Film, he wants to help more Chinese students experience the magic of performance. Nowadays, many people go to the cinema and they watch films on their cell phone sometimes. And from your perspective, compared with motion pictures, what are the unique experiences you can get from live theater performance?
The primary difference is what goes on the stage includes the audience. And in the best of circumstances, there's a kind of almost spiritual experience that happens between the audience and the actors that can never happen in a film. Certainly a film actor or a television actor should be articulate, but they're helped a lot. So that, because, you know, when you're making a movie, you usually mic'd a body mic and then another microphone right here above your head that you can't see in the camera, but it's very close so that you can talk like this. You can whisper and be heard. You can mumble and be understood, and also you've got the help of the camera, which when the movie is shown, your face is going to be 40 feet big. So even, you know, the movement of your eyebrow or the slight turn of your head can mean something emotionally and help an audience to understand. Whereas when you're on a stage, past about the second or third row, people begin to lose your face. They can't really see. So you have your articulation of the play has to be complete with both your body and your voice. And so one of the big differences is that on a stage you've got to be more full and more enriched and complete, vocally and physically, than you would need. Probably wouldn't even necessarily be always appropriate in a movie to be that way.
I know that when it comes to articulation, you can be very meticulous. So how would you practice your lines?
Before the show starts this evening, about a half an hour before the audience comes in, I will warm my voice up and practice my articulation and try to get my facial muscles and lips and tongue ready with just linguistic exercises. And then what we're doing on a stage, primarily the way that we communicate with an audience is through the use of language. So that if the language is not perfect or very nearly perfect, we're not able to communicate in a theater.
Could you give us some examples, maybe some lines?
One of the things in the beginning, early movements of the play, we're introduced to this professor, Ravel.
Yes.
It's his world of Shakespeare as he's introducing Shakespeare to a bunch of students at a boys' school in London. And in the beginning of the introduction, he talks to them about learning to speak Shakespeare correctly. And he's kind of from a very old school about acting, and it's a thing where you did something like trilling your R's. If a word had an R in it, you didn't say R, you said rest. For rest, you would say rest. And so when he's talking to the young students, their very first day, and they have no idea, he seems pretty crazy and wild. He says, now, we're going to study proper Shakespearean pronunciation. And so in that part of the play, I'm kind of making fun of what I used to talk to you about in class, which is being carefully articulate, and we do have to do that, but there's certainly a point where you can be overly articulate, and Ravel is that.
Is Chinese audience interpretation about Shakespeare's work different from people from native-speaking countries?
Having been involved in China with every single one of Shakespeare's plays in one way or another, here's a big difference. When a Shakespeare play is performed in China, whether it's performed in English or Chinese, or some of mine have been performed in English and Chinese and 2 or 3 other languages mixed together too. Many times audiences here will be seeing the story for the first time. So they won't know what happens to Romeo and Juliet, that they both die at the end of the play, or they don't know what happens to Hamlet or King Lear. In the West, when you do a new Shakespeare production, it's usually compared to a famous Shakespeare production, because people that go to the theater will have seen Hamlet 10 times, and so they're comparing. They're not listening to the story anymore, they're making comparisons between somebody's interpretation of Hamlet. Whereas, so Chinese audiences in a way are much purer, much more open to what Shakespeare was doing than Shakespearean audiences in the West, who are more familiar with productions, so they have their ideas colored by things that they've seen in the past. Shakespeare requires far less sophistication than we usually say he does for an audience to appreciate. Actually, he requires an openness, and he's such a better writer than most other writers that if the audience is open, anybody can get it and be moved by it.
For Chinese readers who have heard of Shakespeare and not very familiar with his works, what is the best approach to appreciate?
Well, the best thing is if you can see a Shakespearean production, and particularly in English, not because Chinese actors or Russian actors or French actors or Spanish actors can't perform Shakespeare, they certainly can, but because he's doing such magical things with the English language, no matter how accurate the translation, the magic of the way he uses English is lost. It's always lost. So if you're able to see a very good English language production of Shakespeare, that's a great way to be introduced. Even if your English is not great, you can be moved by the way the actors are connecting with the vowels and the way they use the consonants to stress things and to clarify things. So that's a great way to be introduced. There's a group of books that have come out in recent years that I think are absolutely terrific. If you're brand new to Shakespeare, it's called No Fear Shakespeare. And it has Shakespeare's writing on one side of the page, and the page opposite is in contemporary English. Now, of course, when you look at the contemporary English, you lose all the magic and beauty of this poetry, but it's clear. If you know English at all, you're able to understand precisely, because the Elizabethan language can get rather obscure for
like
someone.
A dictionary.
Yeah, it's like a dictionary, but there's a flow to it because it keeps the dialogue going and just helping you with the meaning. So it's really, really good, very, very helpful, particularly when you're being introduced to Shakespeare.
I think it's very useful information for our readers.
I hope, yeah.
Chinese culture has also a very rich theater heritage. For example, we have Peking opera and the Wenrui opera, which dates back hundreds of years ago. So, have you considered adding Chinese cultural elements to your own production?
I've worked on a number of Shakespeare plays, putting them into Chinese opera forms, and have been involved with 6 of those, where we've taken a Shakespeare play and put it into a specific kind of Chinese opera form. So I'm really familiar with, not like I'm an expert, but I'm really familiar with several of those different Chinese opera forms, and I find them personally really beautiful. But one of the things that they do that's so different than us in the West is that emotion is expressed through movement. And sometimes in certain of the opera forms, actors don't even look at each other. But they're still expressing love or anger or hatred, but they do it in a language that is total. It includes voice, song, movement, dance, and all of those things mean something in expressing not only the story, but the emotion of the character. So in order to really appreciate those, you have to have a degree of familiarity with the movements and what the language is. And They're really quite beautiful and quite powerful once you begin to even have a smattering of understanding of what's going on. If there's something that is some universal quality that can blend both cultures, that can be very effective sometimes.
You talk about the Institute of World Theatre and Film.
Yes.
And so how is the progress by far, and what supports do you need? Because it's a huge amount of work.
Yeah, it's the progress in some way has been pretty dramatic in terms of, like, there have been, over the years now, I've, interacted with literally thousands of students from lots of different universities and professors who are very interested in developing their skills to continue the kind of work in their own university. That part has been very successful, and there have been a lot of those students that have gone on to become teachers, drama teachers here in China, some in America. There have been a number of them who have gone on to become actors and writers and directors. The slower part is finding a way to encourage the universities and the boards of education and that sort of thing to develop these kinds of programs on an ongoing, well-funded and well-staffed style in universities across China. That process is considerably slower.
Do you think that will change?
I think ultimately it will change. I mean, there's a lot of progress being made, particularly in elementary schools and high schools and junior high schools now, that are very well supported by the government in terms of funding to reintroduce music and dance and theater into lower education, below college, I mean. And so if that kind of push can happen in colleges now, it would be good.
So speaking of talent, do you think it's possible to spot a talented actor at first? Or
I do. Certain people you can see almost instantly that they have some unique gift. Now, having said that and meant that, and it's true, there are also certain people who are equally gifted who hide that. They're not as open because they don't know how to be, or and so they may be equally as talented, but it may take some time for that talent to bubble up and be shown. So there's no way to definitively say very early on to someone, you can't do this, or you can do this. After a while of working with people, you can say that. You can make a judgment. You can say, look, maybe you should be a lawyer or something, because I don't think this is, and then it's their decision. I mean, they can go on, and some people that I've thought, having been an actor for way over 40 years now, I've seen people very early on that I thought, oh God, they shouldn't be doing this. And then 20 years later, I work with them again somewhere, and they've suddenly become very good. So it's impossible to say with final authority to make that judgment about somebody else's abilities or blossoming abilities.
Because people are changing.
That's
evolving.
right. We're constantly changing and evolving, yeah.
And from your experience, what are the commonest stereotypes or misunderstandings people have about actors and actresses, and what is the reality?
Most people know actors only from movie stars or television stars, and they look at actors and they see somebody quite often who's very beautiful and very wealthy and maybe a little eccentric in their lifestyle. And
they're celebrities.
Celebrities, yeah. It leads people to think that actors, all actors who are, quote, successful, are famous or rich. And the reality is about the acting profession, 90% of all actors die in poverty. This is just true. And so to dedicate your life to film or television or the theater is a kind of a risky life in terms of financial security. There really isn't any. I mean, those people that make a lot of money make a lot of money as actors, but the majority of actors, they're really happy if they make a living as an actor because the majority of them don't. And I've been really, really blessed with that, but blessed not in terms of fame and millions of dollars, but certainly to be able to live your life and create something artistically valuable. You hope that's artistically valuable to other people.
You once called yourself the Man of La Mancha. So why is that?
I am an artistic director of a musical theater company here. The very first musical that we did was the Man of La Mancha, which is based on the novel Don Quixote and its writer Cervantes. If you've read the novel Don Quixote, Quixote's crazy. He sees things differently in his search for truth. And when we first meet him in the play and in the novel, you think, oh, this guy's completely nuts. But actually, there begins to be the question, as you continue in the novel and continue in that play, who's really crazier, this guy who sees things differently, or us, who see things normally that are perhaps not as normal as we imagine? So the lines between eccentricity and normalcy begin to blur, because this guy is willing to have this adventure to pursue the truth in life at all costs. And that was the first play that we did in this company, and probably when I said that was during the time that we were doing that play and I was directing and playing Don Quixote, this crazy guy, because I do identify with someone being willing to spend their life trying to understand it, to understand themselves and other people, and to have the courage to say that there probably are some things that are really true, and those are the things that I want to connect with in the deepest way possible with my own life.
But I think it's so important to have the courage to be yourself.
I do too, I do too. And first to have the courage to understand what yourself is, because it's very easy to spend almost an entire life not even really knowing what's motivating you. We have these thoughts and ideas and fears and that kind of drive us to do things sometimes that we look at and say, I don't know why I did that. And to be able to find out why we are doing the things we're doing and to change those things that we don't want to be doing and to do more of the things that we believe we should be.